I'm Damien from Pelican Parts, and today I'm going to show you how to install coilovers on your 986 using Rennline's Sport Plus coilover system. With our rig on the lift, let's rip all the wheels off with a 19mm socket. This particular 986 has Rennline's lug stud conversion kit, which makes removing the wheels a breeze. Undo the nut holding the tie rod to the wheel carrier with an 18mm socket. We're using a Schwab ball joint separator tool to press the stud of the tie rod out of the knuckle without damaging the knuckle, the boot, or the tie rod. Remove the two 10mm bolts holding the electrical connections for the wheel speed and brake pad wear sensor to the wheel carrier. There's also a 10mm bolt on the other side of the carrier holding the brake line. We can now safely remove the brake caliper and hang it in the wheel well. Remove the two large bolts holding it to the wheel carrier. These should have a 10mm Allen head, but we have seen it must be aftermarket companies that make them with a T55 Torx. A pry bar will help loosen the caliper from the rotor so you can pull it straight off. The sway bar end link also doubles as the pinch bolt holding the strut into the wheel carrier. Remove the 18mm nut, and if you're lucky, pull the stud straight out. This car is from the Northeast, so we're not getting off that easy. Feel free to use a quality penetrating oil to loosen any corrosion that's locking the pinch bolt into the carrier. We ended up needing some gentle persuasion from a punch and a hammer to get it freed. Time to get the strut mount unbolted so we can take the whole strut out. Remove the 13mm nuts holding the strut mount in place. It's a good idea to mark their position as the holes are slotted for adjusting camber. Since Rennline's coilovers have adjustable camber plates, we decided to leave the factory adjustment where it was to keep things simple. I recommend adding some painter's tape to protect the paintwork on the fender. Pay attention to the orientation of the strut mounts. Match the Rennline camber plates up with the OEM piece to ensure you're indexing the camber plate into the strut correctly. Since the end link froze in the wheel carrier, I added a little dab of anti-seize to stop it from happening again. Seat the coilover into the carrier and push the end link through to hold everything together. Renew the locking nut for the pinch bolt and torque it down to 85 Nm. Reconnect the wheel speed and brake pad wear sensor and bolt the junction back to the wheel carrier. Reinstall the brake caliper, thread in your new mounting bolts, and torque those to 85 Nm. Push the tie rod through the knuckle and thread on a new locking nut. If you don't have an impact gun to overcome the resistance to stop the ball joint from spinning, you can use a T30 Torx socket to counterhold the stud and use a wrench. Torque it down to 75 Nm. tighten all 3 nuts to 33 Newton meters. We reused the factory one since we want to keep the camber plates in the position the OEM strut mounts were. In order to access the rear strut mount nuts, unlock the front of the top and hold the convertible top button in the down position just until the clamshell is at the top of its travel. Using your tool of choice and a 13mm socket, remove the front 2 nuts. The rearmost nut has an access hole in the jamb of the deck lid. Space is limited, so a 13mm deep well socket with a small extension works best for this one. Pull the wiring out of the brackets on the strut and unbolt the wiring from the carrier with a 10mm socket just like the front. Unlock the bracket securing the brake line to the carrier as well. Depending on what was previously installed, the caliper mounting bolts should be the same 10mm hex drive. Remove these and discard them, as new ones should be used every time you remove them. Remove the rear brake caliper just as you did in the front and hang it out of the way. Next, undo the 18mm nut holding the rear toe arm to the carrier. You will need to use the ball joint separator again to get the rear toe arm out of the knuckle. Remove this 18mm nut so you can take the pinch bolt out for the knuckle. In order to gain the clearance needed to remove the rear strut, we have to disconnect the thrust arm from the lower control arm. Using a 21mm wrench and a 19mm of your choice to counter hold the head of the bolt, remove it completely and slide the thrust arm off the bushing. We removed these 4 15mm nuts and loosened the 15mm bolt, holding this diagonal brace in place to gain more clearance for us to press down on the wheel carrier. Since we're aiming to put these back where they were before we started, we marked their position with a paint marker since we will be moving these. The bolts holding the lower control arm and toe arm to the subframe have a built-in eccentric washer that is used to adjust camber or toe. Free the control arm from the subframe by removing the bolt completely. Since the OEM top hat is very tall, you'll need to remove the strut from the carrier first. Press the carrier down towards the ground until you can free the strut body from the top. Before installing Rennline's coilovers into the strut tower, make sure the camber plate is oriented correctly. Move up top, thread on the new nuts for the strut tower, and torque them to 33 Newton meters. Slide the carrier onto the coilover and insert the end link through the carrier to hold everything together. Final torque of the pinch bolt is, you guessed it, 85 Newton meters. Reinstall the toe arm into the carrier and thread on your fresh lock nut. Torque that down to 75 Newton meters. Slide the thrust arm back onto the bushings, reinstall the bolt, and torque the nut to 160 Newton meters using a 21mm crow's foot on your torque wrench. Put the caliper back into place. Torque spec for the mounting bolts is the same as the front, 85 Newton meters. Bolt the brake line and the wiring connections back to the wheel carrier, reconnect the sensors, and route the wiring onto the brackets of the coilover body. Slacken the 19mm nut that holds the inner bushing of the toe arm into the subframe. Since the suspension angles change due to the shorter length of coilover, we want to tension the bushings using a screw jack to push the suspension upwards until the weight of the car is on the suspension. Torque the nut for the camber and toe bolt to 100 Newton meters. Put the diagonal brace back into position and torque all fasteners to 65 Newton meters. Repeat the entire process until this point to install the coilovers on the other side of your Boxster. Spinning the collar that sits under the spring is how you adjust the spring preload. Measure the full relaxed length of the spring on all 4 corners and use that as your baseline measurement. Do not use spring preload to set the ride height. This is why any decent coilover has a second adjustment collar and threaded shock bodies. Now that we've got our coilovers installed, we're gonna go to the alignment shop, get everything dialed in, and if you want to see more, come find us at pelicanparts.com.